This is Reportista with the Hebrew headline news. Here in the Israeli camp, still in the wilderness, may I add, many Israelis are reflecting back to that night in Egypt before we fled Pharaoh, the night of the first great Passover where God miraculously saved his people. So it's teaching us that God saves us and that we can trust him. Let's see what other Israelis are saying about that night. Excuse me, but how do y'all feel about God and the fact that he saved us in Egypt before we fled from Pharaoh? Are y'all remembering back to that night?
Yes.
And do you trust God and do you believe that he will always be there to save us?
Yes, he's always there. He's always there for us.
And do you know if the bread at the food tent is gluten-free?
No.
Like it was that night. That was horrible. That was hard, wasn't it? That was hard.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
So you like gluten-free bread? Or non-leavened bread?
Yes.
How about you?
Yes.
You're a talker, aren't you? Okay. How about you, sir?
Reportista, you're looking kind of rough out here in the wilderness.
Well, we have been in the wilderness for like 30 years. I'm over it. Reportista here. Tell me, is that gluten-free bread or is that regular bread?
Regular.
Now, it must taste a lot better than that bread we had to eat when we escaped from Egypt. Remember that, when it was non-leavened and gluten-free?
Yeah.
So, you're saying you like this bread better?
Mm-hmm.
And are you saying you like living in the wilderness?
Yep.
Excuse me, but is this non-leavened, non-tasting, non-gluten bread like we had when we had to escape Egypt? Or is this actually leavened bread?
This is leavened bread, and it is really
This is right
good.
here?
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Oh, it's so good. I hear horns, it's so good. This is Reportista in the wilderness still at the Israeli camp with some fellow Israelis. Tell us, what did y'all just make?
Butter.
You know, there's some real leavened bread over there. You gonna put your leavened butter? And are you leavening the bread?
Yes.
Because I'm leavening the bread. Are you leavening the bread?
Yes.
Reportista, still in the wilderness, here with some of the Israeli children. Tell me, children, how do you feel knowing that God saved you and that you can trust him?
Because he gave us food and water.
Yes, and God also protected us right before we came out of Egypt. Did you know that?
Yes.
And do you feel like you can always trust God? Raise your hand if you feel like you can trust God. All right, put your hands down. And raise your hand if God has saved you. Awesome. Well, there you have it. God will always save us, and we can what?
Trust God!
Reportista with the Hebrew headline news, still in the wilderness. Are we ever going to leave the wilderness, Moses?
You know, I think maybe we stop complaining and just obey God, that maybe we can't get out of the wilderness. I'm hoping.
Anyway, because we've been in the wilderness for what, 20 years now? Who's going to save us?
You know, you can still take a bath in the wilderness. I'm just saying.
Well, Moses, what are you teaching your people today?
We were just remembering the time that God saved us in Egypt, and it was the kind of the final straw that caused Pharaoh to let us out was when the angel of death flew over, and everyone who didn't have the blood of the lamb over their doors, what we did here, it's just paint tonight, but if you didn't have the blood of the lamb over your door, then the angel of death killed the firstborn. So we're just remembering that tonight. We ate a little flatbread to help us remember that time and remember.
I bet they're not leavening it.
That's right. They are not leavening it. Well, she left it.
So, in closing, this is Reportista with Moses reminding you that God will save us and you can what?